on spending Decision 6 grant money. What can I do with it? So, Mrs. McCaslin, the stage is yours.
Thanks, Eduardo. Hi, everybody. I see some of the chat says that people are still working on making sure the screen is not blank. I'm just going to give it like 10 extra seconds and then we'll jump right in. Hi, Tracy. All right. Well, welcome, everybody. Again, my name is Sarah McCaslin, and I am the Texas Tutoring Grant Specialist here at the agency. I joined the tutor team August of 2021. Prior to that, I taught for a number of years in Muleshoe ISD and then Austin ISD, and have since transitioned to the agency. I support some work in the Division of School Improvement, but most of my efforts are in the world of Texas tutoring. And so I'm happy to be here with you guys today to help provide some additional guidance for those Decision 6 districts. How can you spend your grant money to move the needle forward for students when it comes to learning loss and gaps and things of that nature? So today, this is a little bit of a breakdown of how I see us spending our time. There will be an overview of the T-Class Decision 6 grant, specifically the high impact tutoring. I'll give a timeline of that grant cycle, as well as dive into the grant assurances that Decision 6 LEAs have agreed to. We'll spend particularly an amount of time honing in on the subsidized provider element of this Decision 6 grant, as well as data collection and where we see that moving forward. The bulk of our time will be spent on spending guidance. And so we'll open it up with just an overview of really what best practice looks like when it comes to drawing down grant funds. And then we'll move into what are some allowable costs that you can use your Decision 6 money on, as well as some unallowable costs. Afterwards, we'll look at the ESC Texas Tutoring Support Grant and talk about ways that their tutoring support grant and your Decision 6 grant coincide, and how there are lots of different ways that you guys can utilize your ESC to make sure that you're not duplicating efforts and that you're really honing in on their wealth of resources that they have established for you guys through their grant. I anticipate there being time for question and answer at the end. Normally, I would take questions on a rolling basis, but since there's a lot of moving parts here, anytime you have a question, feel free to put it in the chat, and Eduardo is going to compile all of those. And then at the end of the session, if there's a question he feels that I didn't get to, or you have additional questions, we'll make sure that we take some time to address those as well. All right. So we'll start with an overview of the Decision 6 grant. So when it was opened up, traditional public schools and charters were eligible to apply. And really what this grant encourages is the implementation of high impact tutoring. We can think of the win in two different ways. The more obvious win is that the grant spans from 2021 to 2024. But more particularly, when we're talking about the accomplishment of the grant and we're talking about high impact tutoring, we're looking at 30-minute sessions at least 3 times a week with a 3-to-1 student to teacher ratio. Where does this take place? There's been lots of talk around this. Hopefully you've been able to join some of the previous sessions, but we look at integrating it into the master schedule, especially if your number one tutor is a teacher tutor or a paraprofessional. There are also opportunities for you to do after school, weekends, before school, summer school, or dive into using virtual tutors as opposed to what used to be the more traditional face-to-face option. And so really the why of this grant in this Texas Tutoring Initiative goes beyond just the agency said, hey, we want to prioritize this. Really, in a partnership with the Annenberg Institute, if you guys had a chance to view the speaker this morning, or you can go back and look at the keynote, we know that based off of nationwide research that high impact tutoring leads to substantial learning gains for students by supplementing a student's traditional classroom experiences. And so we wanted to provide some tools and resources and money to Decision 6 districts that are interested in engaging in the high impact tutoring work. As far as the timeline goes, just as a blanket statement reminder, the T-Class Decision 6 funds come from ESSER 3 only. If your LEA has other decision points, then there's a chance they might draw from general revenue. And the only reason I mention that is because it puts us on a bit of a different timeline. And so I didn't want anybody to get thrown off. But the reporting period for any of the T-Class ESSER 3, and in this case, Decision 6, is from March 1st, 2021 to August 31st of 2024. Pre-award costs are permitted if requested and approved, and that would have been from March 1st, 2021 until whatever your stamp in date was. So whenever you submitted on behalf of your LEA your application, then pre-award costs are allowable. The final expenditure report for this grant is due November 29th of 2024. And really what we want to focus on is what does it look like moving forward? And so year one of this grant, or this past school year, has kind of been an era of leniency based on, the obviousness of the world that we're still living in with COVID and teacher attrition and burnout. There's a number of challenges and barriers that are not unbeknownst to the agency. And so the tutoring team wanted to make sure that not only with the release of T-Class Decision 6, but with also kind of the reactive stance a lot of us have had to take with 4545, making sure that there was this time period allotted to our districts to figure out how can we refine our systems to meet the minimum requirements of 4545. And then for those Decision 6 districts, how can we tweak and refine them even further to accommodate what has been determined as best practice through high impact tutoring. So moving forward, implementation is going to be required either this summer or this fall. And what that looks like is whatever subsidized provider that your district has chosen to partner with, be it Amplify, Booknook, Zern, or a combination of those. You'll want to start using those platforms with fidelity. And then, of course, establishing some sort of system, be it integrated into the master schedule before or after school, any of those wins that we talked about earlier, either this summer or moving forward into the fall. Okay, so grant assurances. Let me make sure, there we go. So when your LEA representative signed off on Decision 6 grant assurances, this is exactly what they saw. And so I just kind of want to go over them one by one, make sure we're all on the same page. LEAs agree to adhere to statutory requirements for accelerated instruction. So we know that within the umbrella of learning acceleration, we have this one strategy of high impact tutoring. High impact tutoring goes a little bit above and beyond the expectations of 4545. So we're making sure that our Decision 6 districts who did receive the T-Class grant are not only maintaining 4545 requirements, but that we're eventually seeing that progress into a more high-impact tutoring stance. The second assurance is that the LEAs will participate in data collection on the efficacy and the impact of their programs. Now that we're moving into implementation year 2, we'll spend some time in the next slide really talking about what data collection looks like moving forward. The third assurance is that LEAs agree to cover any additional costs that are associated with the VTTC. And so within the vetted Texas Tutor Core, there's two separate categories. There's the subsidized providers, which is Amplify, Booknook, Zern. Decision 6 districts get those licenses for free. And then on the flip side, there's our approved providers. And those are dozens and dozens of additional vetted resources that Decision 6 districts, and really any district, can utilize either with local funds or in this case with Decision 6 funds. And if there are any supplemental materials by the subsidized provider, any additional costs associated with tutor training by the subsidized by the approved provider, that the LEA agrees, to encumber those costs. So those are the third and the fourth bullet. And then the last one is that if there are costs associated with the recruitment and training of tutors by approved providers. And so again, to reiterate, on the vetted Texas Tutor Core, subsidized providers are free licenses to Decision 6 districts. and your ESCs are equipped to train your tutors on those 3 subsidized providers for free. With the approved providers, if there are additional training measures, additional tutoring materials, then you can use your Decision 6 funds to compensate for that. If you specifically have questions about adhering to those statutory requirements for accelerated instruction, I put the link to the most recent FAQ at the bottom of this page, and you can reference it. I think the latest update was March 24th. Okay, a couple of notes. With your subsidized providers, Amplify, Book Nook, and Zern, a Decision 6 awardee must utilize at least one of those providers with fidelity at some level within your LEA. And so you have a bit of autonomy and discretion here. The expectation is that not every single one of your students is using it. It doesn't have to be every single grade level. It doesn't have to be every single campus. But if you are awarded, the Decision 6 grant, we want to make sure that the licenses that are provided to you on our behalf are used with fidelity. One small note here is that if you are a Decision 6 LEA who is currently rostered and using Book Nook licenses, those will continue through the 22-23 school year. After that, there won't be an opportunity to renew for that 23-24 part of the grant cycle. However, TEA has already created plans to support LEAs that are using those Book Nook licenses to transfer over to another provider if needed. And then data collection. I know this is a big piece of grant assurances. It's always a hot topic. What we've done is worked with our ESCs to collaborate on an LEA level self-evaluation tool. And that really just helps create a space for formative and summative assessment of your Decision 6 endeavors. And so we grounded it in reflection and growth. It's not a compliance tool. It's not something to, dangle over your head and threaten, take away money. But rather it provides a series of guiding questions to help facilitate conversations with your campus leaders, with your district leaders, to figure out where you are in this umbrella of high impact tutoring and how you can progress to meeting those expectations, to exceeding those expectations. And then can you get to an exemplary status? Can you become a model district of what high impact tutoring really embodies and looks like? And then if we're not quite there, if we're seeing that there are still a lot of challenges, a lot of barriers, then there is built in this self-evaluation tool an opportunity for you to really interact with the rubrics and the tool that's provided and look at different resources, supplemental materials, connections with the ESCs that you can utilize and integrate into your high impact tutoring implementation plans to get you moving forward and in the right direction so that we're seeing those student growth outcomes that we want to see. If you are interested and you are in need of more narrow data collection tools, meaning maybe you have campuses that are still struggling with how can I collect my 45 hours or my high impact tutoring hours? How can I store tutor information? How can I make sure that those local level data pieces are being accounted for? Then you can go to the Texas Tutoring Supports webpage, which will also hyperlink you to the Accelerated Instruction webpage. And both of those have some templates either from districts or that the agency has created to help facilitate tracking those specific numbers at a local level. And again, if you're late joining, if you have questions, please put those in the chat. Eduardo is going to capture all of them. And if there are any at the end that I haven't addressed, I'll be happy to do a little Q&A. Okay, so we've laid the foundation for T-Class Decision 6, and now we're going to look at how can we kind of take the world of money and the work that our teachers and our tutors are doing under the umbrella of high impact tutoring and kind of marry those together, because the point of a grant is to give dollars to help facilitate different initiatives and different systems that you guys want to put in place to help students with learning loss and learning gaps. So to preface what's allowable and what's not allowable, something really, really important when it comes to successfully spending down a grant is to build and maintain relationships with your central business office. When you are having conversations with your business office, make sure you're asking questions like, how was this grant initially budgeted? Where is the money allocated? What have we set aside for personnel? What have we set aside for contracted services? What do we have for supplies and materials? So on and so forth. And if you are listening to me now and you are the person that's working in the central business office, how can you foster and create relationships with other campus and district leaders that are closer to the work? So consider things like monthly check-ins, even if it's pretty informal, to talk about what has been spent, what's left, and then really taking it a step further to utilize teacher and tutor input for programming. Asking your teacher tutors or tutors that you've hired from another source what the gaps are, what their struggles are, and then being able to turn that around and ask, how can our Decision 6 funds support solutions-oriented brainstorming and problem solving is really crucial to make sure that we're successfully spending this grant and meeting those grant objectives. And then finally, talk about what's going well in the tutor programming and ask, have those funds supported those celebrations and areas of strength? And then how can you replicate those on different campuses, different grade levels? And how can you really build on those systems to make sure that you're equipping your campus leaders and your teacher tutors to move forward with the grant? And then the last piece on successfully spending a grant, we'll talk more about this at the end, is please make sure you're staying connected with your education service center. All 20 regions have been awarded a ESC Texas Tutor Support Grant. We'll talk later about what that looks like and these specific supports that they provide you guys with. But just as you're having these conversations as a district, find ways that you can integrate your tutor leads from the ESCs into those conversations to move money where it needs to go. All right. So what is allowable? I do want to preface this with this list is not exhaustive and it is certainly not prescriptive. I'm not in the business of telling you guys how to spend your money, but instead creating resources where other LEAs have said, hey, this is what we're doing, and then compiling those and giving you guys kind of the more obvious ways that you can spend your Decision 6 grant money. And then possibly some more outside of the box ways that you can spend your money. So these are broken down by budget object code. And so when we're looking at 6100 payroll, what are some ways that we can use our grant funds in this world of paying personnel? So if you've got teacher tutors, consider things like stipends, extra duty pay, hourly pay for tutoring that's beyond their normal contract hours. We don't want to double dip. Taking a second here to pause and again recognize the issues that we're facing with teacher vacancies, with teacher burnout and attrition. Sticking money on top of a problem does not solve it. That would be naive to think. But there are ways that this grant can help provide teachers with a sense of professionalism and with us taking them seriously and wanting to compensate them for the extra work that we know that we're doing. And so if you have a lot of teacher tutors and you're experiencing some of those burnout issues, come together as leaders and talk about if this Decision 6 grant can be used in this first bullet. If you have non-teacher tutors, consider hourly rates, consider stipends. If you have tutors that are going to training, and by if I mean when, because all of your tutors will have to become trained either in your subsidized provider platforms, Book Nook, Amplify, Zearn, as well as your high impact tutor training that your ESC offers. So if you're having trouble incentivizing them to go to those trainings, then offer paid training. If you've got bus drivers that are driving additional routes before or after school that are outside of the normal school routes, you can consider stipends for your bus drivers as well. 6,200 contracted services. If you've got money that you're struggling to spend in this category, consider the Vetted Texas Tutor Corps. Again, both maybe some additional supplemental materials from the subsidized providers that aren't necessarily covered by the licenses we provide you for free, or on the approved provider list. Is there another vendor that you're interested in working with? Data management specialist. Do you need to contract somebody to help more at a local level, organize your data, disaggregate your data, and really use it to turn it around and inform your tutoring practices that you're experiencing in your district? Content specialist. Part of the grant objective is to figure out where are the gaps. And so if you have students that are involved in high impact tutoring and they're going to high impact tutoring successfully with fidelity, they're using the different subsidized providers that we've provided you, and we're still experiencing gaps, then you can really utilize either ESC or district level content specialist, or even through a different vendor, to come in and really teach your teacher tutors or your other tutors on how to take specific TEKs and turn those around with more strategy, with more intimate lesson planning, with more resources that you can utilize to really move those students to a mastery level if you see that they're continuously hitting that wall. Test scoring and printing costs are allowable. Electricity, energy sources, water, waste, utilities that are being encumbered outside of the regular school day can be charged to the grant as well. Technology, and there's a little note here. The technology, you'll need to keep local documentation that proves the purchase of your technology was in fact necessary to meet grant objectives. So just make sure that you're being adamant about making sure that your documentation expresses that you needed that. Data management platforms and subscriptions kind of go into the data management specialists. A lot of districts are beginning to investigate how can we digitally keep track of our 45-45, or in the Decision 6 world, this high impact tutoring hours that our students are receiving, especially maybe if they're working in a program outside of your subsidized licenses with Book Nook, Amplify, and Zern, who keep up with those minutes for you. Keeping in mind that you can use data management platforms and charge those to the grant if you're trying to digitize those records. Nutritional snacks provided during extended school day hours, so before or after school or weekend, that is an allowable cost. Again, with the technology, please, in the same sense, make sure that you're keeping local documentation that proves that the nutritional snack was very much needed to meet grant objectives. Fuel that's used for transporting students to and from the outside school or outside normal school hours. If you need textbooks, reference books, supplemental reading materials, or audio visuals that your tutor groups are utilizing to tackle different TEKs and content, by all means. General office supplies, if you need curriculum supports for tutoring, so like workbooks, whether those be from a vetted Texas Tutor Corps approved provider or somebody else that you vetted. And then if you want to issue small incentives for tutor participation, things like printed certificates, ribbons, medals to your students, that's something you can also charge to the grant. There's kind of a caveat there, but we'll address it here in just a second. Other operating costs, this could be advertising costs if you're trying to do some programmatic outreach or tutor recruitment. If you've got in-state travel for your employees as it relates to grant objectives, different trainings that you're sending them to under this umbrella of high impact tutoring. And then if you are hiring new employees as tutors and you need to run background checks, then you can charge that to the grant as well. So again, when we talk about allowable, it's not exhaustive. I'm not telling you how to spend the money, but it really is an evolving list of ways that we've seen money spent so far. That's meant to provide you guys with more opportunities to figure out which of these supports that do require funds is going to be best practice for your district. Okay, so we're in unallowable now. This one's a bit shorter. Again, not exhaustive, but in this case, it is in fact prescriptive. So please, as you are determining what to charge to this grant, when we're thinking about 6100 payroll, you cannot do non-employee stipends. Contributions to employment retirement plans is not allowed. And then payroll that exceeds your own local policy. So make sure that you're referencing that. I am going to make a note here as well. A popular FAQ has been around summer school. If you have summer school programming that's sole purpose is for things like credit recovery, attendance makeup, bilingual education students are going to summer school, or you're sending people to summer school for the blanket statement of meeting that 45, 30-hour requirement, charging the cost of teacher stipends or tutor stipends to the Decision 6 grant would not be allowable. If, however, your summer programming does have a foundation in high impact tutoring, then that is something that you could charge payroll costs to the grant. And then just keep in mind, high impact tutoring covers 45. It covers credit recovery. It covers bilingual education. It's something that's very foundational and can be used to refine any of the practices or any of the programming that you guys have now. But again, just keep that in mind as you're determining what you're spending money on. 6,200 contracted services. You cannot use the grant for fundraising activities. You cannot use it for training or technical assistance as it pertains to grant writing. No building remodels either. 6,300 supplies and materials. Unallowable costs would be those associated with award ceremonies or social events. Supplies, materials, technology for personal use or for use that is just completely outside of grant objectives. If you purchase an iPad and a student and a tutor group never touches it, then there's probably an issue there. Things like gifts, souvenirs, promotional items. You could think of like t-shirts with logos, little pins or something. That's not something that can be charged to the grant. And then, as I mentioned earlier, smaller incentives like certificates, like printed certificates, congratulations, you've got this many hours or something, or ribbons, medals, those are okay. But larger incentive items like gift cards, door prizes, that's not something that can be purchased through this grant. And then lastly, 6,400 operating costs. Out of state travel is unallowable. And then if you've got an employee going to training that takes place in the residing city, things like food and lodging costs are not something that you can charge the grant. If you are interested in an expanded list, there is one linked here. Again, it is updated on a rolling basis. So as we have conversations with ESCs who are having conversations with you guys about how you're choosing to spend your Decision 6 dollars, or as I'm getting emails and questions and ideas, this list is growing. And if you have ideas that you'd like to share, please, I'll have my email at the end. Feel free to reach out. Or the same if you have a question. If you have an idea of how you want to spend money, I would advise to direct it to your service center first. They hear me talk about this probably more often than they would like, and can answer a good bit of these questions as well. And if not, they'll forward it to me. But again, that list is there if you need to refer to it in the future. And then lastly, I just wanted to take 5 or 6 minutes or so and talk about the ESC level supports that are available to you guys through the corresponding ESC Texas Tutoring Support Grant. So as I mentioned earlier, when we talk about best practice for spending grant dollars, staying connected with your ESC is essential. They also have a 21-24 support grant to help scale tutoring initiatives that coincide very, very closely with both Decision 6 and now that Decision 11 has kind of entered the playing field, there's some supports there as well. Within this grant, the ESC has been equipped to do a number of things. The first thing is that they're able to assist LEAs with implementation of the High Impact Tutoring Toolkit, as well as a whole slew of other materials that are available through the agency, specifically those that are named in the Texas Tutoring Support webpage. Webinars, scheduling resources, you name it, it's there. And if it's not there, we hope to add it in the near future as more integrated supports. The second thing their grant allows them to do is provide you guys with one-to-one technical assistance, not only with your subsidized providers, but with implementing Decision 6 efforts as well. High Impact Tutoring Workshop Series. The agency has developed a HIT workshop, and ESCs have turned that around to be able to provide it to you all. Subsidized provider training, the same thing. Amplify, Booknook, and Zern have trained our ESCs to be able to either facilitate or trainer of trainer method, give your teachers, your tutors the training that they need to be successful as they're working with student groups in Amplify, Booknook, and Zern. They're also able to assist LEAs with tutor recruitment supports. And then the last thing is one of their grant responsibilities is to collect and analyze data to evaluate regional impact and perform strategic adjustments. So if we take those first 5 within this list here, we can break them down a little bit further and talk more specifically about how this benefits you guys. And so we really want to make sure that Decision 6 LEAs, and really beyond Decision 6 LEAs, there are some general resources available if you know districts that are not engaging in Decision 6 work, but want to take on the world of high impact tutoring. Encourage them also to talk to their ESCs, even if they don't have that direct grant, Decision 6 grant. Anyways, if we break down the resources that the ESCs provide to you, what we want to make sure you guys are aware of, or we want to make sure that you don't put yourself in a position of creating or seeking out a resource and using your own Decision 6 dollars to fund that, when the ESCs could quite potentially have a resource or a tool or an opportunity already available. And so when we're talking about the ESC objective of helping you guys with toolkit implementation and other supports, like I've said, they've already integrated the High Impact Tutoring Toolkit and the Texas Tutoring Support webpage and some of those tools into their High Impact Tutoring training. Additionally, there are they reference available supports in different webinars, calls, and marketing opportunities, and different communications that they're running on our behalf. Technical assistance, they meet with Decision 6 LEAs. A lot of them meet with even non-Decision 6 LEAs to discuss their 45-45 efforts, and then specifically for Decision 6, how you plan on refining that into high impact tutoring plans. They will design and implement tailored trainings and resources for LEAs to use in tackling different challenges and barriers. TEA has one broad scope, so we wanted to be able to provide ESCs with the opportunity to really engage with you guys who very obviously know your students a lot better and can cater to different demographics, different just regional situations, and help you identify challenges and then problem solve. They also have the ability to access vendor usage reports moving forward from the subsidized providers. So as your campuses are engaging with Amplify, Booknook, and Zern, if you're interested in knowing like what fidelity of implementation looks like, how are we using these platforms, where are our gaps, then the ESCs have the opportunity to look at those usage reports and say, hey, this is what looks good, this is what maybe needs a little bit more growth. High Impact Tutoring Workshop Series. This is offered on a rolling basis by your ESCs with the goal of delivering this high impact tutoring training to all of your Decision 6 tutors. It is adapted, again, to meet the regional needs as well as urban, suburban, and rural districts. They integrate feedback and follow up on behalf of LEAs. And then a lot of them are starting to host nationally known tutor researchers to speak at trainings. And so if there is an element or a piece of this puzzle that is outside of their scope, they are doing everything they can to pull in supports from all over the place and provide you guys with free opportunities as Decision 6 districts to go and to listen to some of the leading experts, like what we're doing today. Subsidized provider trainings. All of the ESCs are trained in Amplify, Booknook, and Zern and provide you with opportunities to get trained in those respective platforms. Again, one little note here that I want to mention is that beyond the 22-23 school year, because there is no renewal contract, the ESC will not provide technical assistance or training specifically for Booknook. But again, I want to reiterate, we have agency plans in place, and I've already started contacting those Book Nook districts to see what we're going to do moving forward and how we can facilitate transferring them to perhaps a different provider when the time comes. Lastly, tutor recruitment support. Every ESC has developed a tutor bank that LEAs can use as part of recruitment efforts. Now, this doesn't mean that every single ESC has found and trained and is able to hire and deploy those tutors, but they do have perhaps lists of resources that will help you form partnerships with universities, high school students, community members, nonprofits, workforce commissions, and they're able to say, hey, if you're struggling with staffing needs, let's check out these resources. More specifically, ESCs 1, 2, and 20 do have the ability to staff tutors or have been partnering with third-party staffing vendors to provide you guys with the staffing resources, be it face-to-face or virtual, that you need to tackle some of those personnel challenges. And then finally, a lot of our ESCs who are not specifically staffing tutors or did not specifically initially sign up to staff tutors are still pursuing and developing contracts with other vendors to support some of those staffing needs. So again, what we don't want to happen is, you're creating the wheel and so is somebody else and so is somebody else. We want to try and make this resource sharing as fluid as possible. And so as soon as challenges are identified, please consult your education service center. And then if it's not something they can take immediate action on, all of those things get rolled back up to the agency. And while we might not have an immediate response, just know that those challenges are heard. Okay, so that is all that I have. I think that we obviously have plenty of time for Q&A. I do want to reiterate that you should have in the attachment section a copy of this PowerPoint with all of the resources linked. And again, I just want to reiterate, please, if you don't already know, find out who your service center tutor lead is, get connected with them. And I know that they're probably bombarding you with communication as well. So take advantage of that. And then I think Eduardo is going to pop on and perhaps facilitate some Q&A if there are some questions I haven't answered yet.
Absolutely, Sarah. And so we had a total of 4 questions. And so the first one was with regard to linking the tools. So what I did was provided the link for the Texas Tutoring Supports webpage where they have tools. The next question, regarding trainings and utilizing your ESCs, do you have to stick with your ESC or can you enroll in these similar trainings in a different ESC?
Yes and yes. All of your education service centers are equipped to provide high impact tutoring training and equipped to provide subsidized provider training. In some instances, there are some ESCs that have been people sharing and allowing people to mosey on over, especially since our regional borders are kind of wonky sometimes. But by all means, you are able to utilize other ESCs. I would encourage, healthy relationships and using your own ESC to help foster a partnership elsewhere. But if there's a gap in training, then we want to do whatever it takes to make sure that you're getting the information that you need from whatever qualified resource that is.
Thank you. The third question. We have a school who wants to use a company from the Texas Vetted Tutors list, but they don't want to complete our background check again since their tutors already have to go through a background check with a company. Have you heard about this issue, and is there any discussion of allowing LEAs to use the company's background check?
Eduardo, if this was already in the question, if you'll verify it for me, or perhaps whoever answered this question can verify it, are they specifically talking about somebody that was listed in the VTTC as an approved provider? Or was it a non-VTTC?
That it is a VTCC.
Okay. Really in both regards. The vetting process on behalf of the agency is looking at a different set of standards. So mainly focusing on TEKS alignment, making sure that capacity is available, making sure that content is up to the caliber that we expect, and making sure also that those potentially approved providers, if they do make it through, are aware of agency initiatives, core values, beliefs, and that's kind of what they're evaluated on. In terms of background checks, it is, a third-party contract between the district and the approved provider that the agency doesn't set in on and isn't affiliated with. So I would encourage you really to just consult, excuse me, local policy. And if that's still a barrier and that particular approved provider is still causing issues in that realm, be it for whatever reason, I mean, everybody has policy they need to stick by. Feel free to shoot me an email, and we can figure out internally if there are other supports to aid in that process.
Okay. Thank you, Sarah. And then the final question, can you please elaborate on the use of T-class funds for summer programs geared for HB 4545?
Sure. So 'tis the time of year, right, where we're starting to think about summer programming and starting to think about I lost my train of thought. But yes, so in terms of master scheduling, that's where I was going. With summer programming, what we don't want to see is, districts may already have in place summer programming, like I said earlier, that is really built on a number of things, none of which necessarily bad, but may not reach the caliber of high impact tutoring. And so, the goal of this grant and our objectives and assurances that are outlined through T-Class Decision 6 is really progressing towards and implementing and really moving to this mastery level of high impact tutoring. And so if an LEA wants to fund summer programming through the Decision 6 grant, then that needs to be the foundation with which that program is built on. And so as you are paying personnel through different stipends or hourly pay for tutoring services, including in the summer months, they need to be engaging in the criteria that are involved with high impact tutoring. And again, if there's some maybe gaps in knowledge, consult your ESC on that, consult the high impact tutoring toolkit that the agency puts forth. There are also some exemplary master scheduling for summer programmings that are built on the idea of high impact tutoring. And so again, when we're encountering situations like credit recovery and our high schoolers need to make up attendance, or our preschoolers need to come in and get ahead, none of those things are in and of themselves wrong, and they're necessary, right? But if they're not, again, built on that core foundation of high impact tutoring, which then in turn encompasses credit recovery and 4545 and bilingual ed and attendance makeup, then we really can't justify the use of funds going towards those programs. If that did not more fully answer that question, feel free to drop it in the chat. I can see the chat at this point.
Okay, great. And then we had another question come in. Could we use T-Class funds to purchase a FlexTime tool, which is a web page tool provided by an outside partner / vendor, to help with scheduling students in secondary schools?
So I'm going to assume that tool would help you integrate the necessary hours and scheduling stipulations that are centered around meeting not only, with high impact tutoring, we're looking at 30-minute sessions at least 3 times a week, excuse me, with a 3-to-1 ratio. If you need a tool to help you figure out what that schedule looks like, then please, by all means, purchase something that's going to help you create the desired schedule that you need to implement high impact tutoring. Yeah. Assuming those are Decision 6 funds.
Okay. And that looks like all of the questions that we have so far.
Awesome. Wonderful. Well, my contact information is on the screen now. You also have access to Texas Tutoring inbox and Accelerated Instruction inbox. And again, excuse me, I'm so sorry. I'm sure I sound like a broken record. Please, please, please reach out to your education service centers and lean in on them as a resource as well. But yeah, if we don't have any other questions, that is all that I have. You have a copy of this in case you want to go back and reference it. And just remember that that budget guidance document is rolling. And so as you come back to it every couple of weeks or months, hopefully we will see lots of growth to it.
Great. All right. Thank you, everyone, for attending this great session. And so remember that these are being recorded and will be available to you for 30 days, beginning Monday, I believe. And so thank you all and have a awesome day and a nice weekend.
Bye, everybody.